What's up, guys? Ted from Immersion here, and we're on to the third part of the D&D 101 series. What do you need to get started playing as a player? I'm going to do another short video after the fact, talking about what you're going to need to start playing and kind of get things going as a dungeon master, but for now, let's focus on the player side of things. To be honest, you don't need a lot. It seems kind of intimidating. I'm sure you've seen things online and miniatures. People are dressed up. It's all crazy. You don't need that. You may not even need anything at all. First thing you got to do is talk to your DM. He may tell you, or he or she may tell you, or they may tell you, just show up. And I've been there. That was my first game. I just showed up at the place. The DM had a character sheet ready for me, printed out. Hey, good thing, you got here a little bit early. Let's make your character. What did you want to do? We make the character. I've got pencils for everybody. I've got the books. Don't worry about that. And here's some, community dice that you can use. So, but let's start there and say that's not the case. Character sheet. You're going to want to bring a character sheet, either blank because you're brand new and you haven't done anything, or filled out because you've already worked with the DM. If you have already filled out your character sheet, make sure you bring it with you, because that's also a frustrating thing that can happen. You build your character and you leave your sheet at home, and then everybody's there ready to play, and you got to try to recreate everything you already filled out at home on this new sheet now, and you're kind of holding everybody up. Something to be mindful of. There are tons of versions of character sheets for all editions of Dungeons & Dragons. Make sure the one that you print is the one for your edition. I know that sounds silly, but a lot of them kind of look similar. And make sure you print one that you can understand. I know, just right off the bat, Wizards of the Coast and Dungeons & Dragons, this is one of the versions of their sheets. Version, sounds weird. Anyway, this is one of the versions. They have another version with the skills kind of oriented differently. So, that's two that they made, but then there's tons of fan versions. And I've seen some fan versions, and they're nuts, man. You've got, big circular grids with triangles and crap in the middle, and I can't make any sense of it. So that's the most important part. If you can make sense of your character sheet, then you're going to know when the DM says, what's your perception? You can go, oh, perception, got it. And he'll tell you, or you'll know what you need to do. The other part is, I'd also make sure that the other big thing is, if your DM says, hey, can I see your character sheet? You said your perception was an 18. Where is that on your sheet? So you can say, oh, it's on the bottom left right over here. As long as you can explain where stuff is located, then that's good to go. There's some short sightings to some of these. This is just printed on regular old printer paper. You may want to look into printing yours on cardstock, something a little hardier, because I have had situations where I've been changing my hit points, Dragon knocks me down, Cleric heals me back up, and you're back and forth, your health is yo-yoing up and down, and you're just constantly erasing your hit points, and you will basically erase a hole right through the back of your character sheet, and now it's smudged and useless. So, thicker stock of paper might be worth looking into. So, while we're talking about character sheet and erasing, pencil. You're going to want at least one pencil. Mechanical or otherwise, maybe two, and maybe one pencil and an eraser. And it's not that I don't think, or your dungeon master doesn't think, that you're going to fill this out correctly. The problem is, most of this character sheet, with the exception of a couple of columns, are going to change as you play. So, you level up, you're going to have to change some of these stats, this here, your health, blah, blah, blah. So you're going to be constantly erasing. And I have had mistake players in the past write stuff on their character sheet in pen. And then I said, well, that's great, but you just leveled up. So you're going to print you another sheet so you can do it in pencil. So that's something you might want to look into. Thicker stock paper. Bring yourself a good pencil with a good eraser, because we all know there's some of those mechanical pencils out there that when you go to erase something, it just smudges the graphite all over the page, and it's just completely useless. So, character sheet, filled out or non, one that you can understand, pencil. Something else? Notebook, scrap paper, post-it notes, whatever it is. Something for you to keep track of things you don't want to keep track of on your character sheet. Maybe you want to just have one page where you just keep track of your health, and as it goes up and down, you just write out the little numbers, and you don't deface the front of your character sheet. You have a small little area here on the bottom, and one area here on the back for your treasure. Now granted, there's nothing stopping you from writing your treasure anywhere else on any of the character sheet, but if you want to stick true to what it has set up, those are the only spots. Or maybe your party has a kind of group collective treasure and somebody's got to keep track of it. Well, if you don't have scrap paper to keep track of it on, you might be out of luck. So it's always a good thing to have. It's a good way to keep track of, you know, initiatives, maybe your AC, maybe, you know, whatever else, things that come up. You might be taking notes on, you know, the DM tells you you're in a council meeting and there's 10 council members and here are their names and why they're important. And if you don't remember who they are, then, and the DM says like, well, you were introduced to them, you know, that's that. You might want to have something written down, notes, quests that you're going on, why you're doing what you're doing. This way you have references for later. So scrap paper, solid thing to have. Something else you want to have, it's a nerdy thing, you might have them already even if you don't play, but nerds kind of like to have them, is a set of your own dice. I don't have an actual full set here, I just have some random dice. But you don't necessarily need these. Again, the first game I played in, the DM had like 3 or 4 sets of dice and he just kind of community supplied them, and I typically do that with my games. I have pounds upon pounds of dice, so I always have stuff if people need to play with something. But the core one you're going to want more than anything is the 20-sided die. In Dungeons & Dragons, the 20-sided die is key. This does everything. Except for damage, but pretty much everything else in the game is all dealt with the 20-sided die. So what you are going to need is, you can buy sets of 7 dice, really. And you're probably going to want to look at Chessex, that's Chessessex. They're one of the more prominent dice companies. There are other ones. You can get fancy dice. Depends on how much money you want to spend. You can get them made out of metal, wood, mammoth bone, gemstones, asteroids. Like, not even kidding. Those are all things that existed at one point or another based on availability. But you're probably just going to want to buy a nice, simple Chessex set of 7 dice. It comes with a 20-sided die, a 12-sided die, a 10-sided die, a percentile-sided die, which is just a d10 with 2 numbers that you roll to try to determine a percentage from 0 to 100. An 8-sided die, a 6-sided die, and a 4-sided die. You might also want to get an additional 3 6-sided dice. If you're rolling for your ability scores, you'll be rolling 4d6. Some of the more high-end dice sets actually give you that option to buy a set of 7 or a set of 10. And the set of 10 is basically that original 7, but with 3 more in-theme 6-sided dice. You can go nuts. You can get pearlescent, opalescent, translucent, solid. You're looking at around an average of about a $10 price range. The more simple ones may be on sale. You're going to look at $7, $8. The pricier ones with the more intricate marbleizer design, you're going to look at more like a $13 to $12. I know companies like Chessex, they sometimes go to conventions, or at most conventions you might be able to just buy dice there. Your game shop or hobby shop might have dice available there as well. At Dragon Con last year, Chessex was one of the people in the vendor hall, and they had just a big box, like this big, with a coffee mug. And it was like 10 or 15 bucks, and you could just take this coffee mug and scoop up as many dice as you could fit into it. And they put that in a bag for you. Not the mug, just the dice. And that was like 10 or 15 bucks, and you just got a mug full of dice. And now you have extras. You're rolling advantage, disadvantage. You can roll 2 dice rather than 1, or whatever you want to do. So, dice. Again, not necessary. You can probably bum it off somebody else. If your DM's cool with it, there are dice rolling apps and things like that. If you're in a virtual tabletop, you're probably going to be rolling digitally anyway. Let's see. Something you don't necessarily need, but I would highly recommend, is your own copy of the Player's Handbook. The more copies of the Player's Handbook at a table, the better. Again, I played my first game, we had 1 copy, which was fine, but if I needed to look up one of my spells, and then my buddy who was next line in initiative needed to look up his, I couldn't just open the spell and leave it on the page. I had to hand it off to him, and then we'd have to go through this whole process again and again, until we got to the point where we got smart, and we only had 1 copy, so we made photocopies of, like, I always use this spell, let me photocopy that sheet, and now I have that spell to reference. We'll talk a little bit more on ways to track that kind of stuff. separately. But if you're going to be playing, say, in the Adventure League, you might be playing with people you don't know. And not everybody, but some people are really weird about their books and their stuff. Like, this is my player's handbook. The Adventure League rule says you're supposed to bring your own. You can't see mine. Not saying that that's going to happen to you, or not saying that the Dungeon Master isn't going to be like, here, yeah, whatever, it's fine. But you might run into people that are like that, you know, or something similar to that. So, best to have your own copy. It will slow down combat at your table if there's only one copy and everybody's vying for it. But the thing is, as a player, this is your manifesto. This is your handbook. Everything in here is fair game for you to look at, reference. Some of the stuff in the monster manual, the DM might not want you to look at, because it's statistics for monsters you might be fighting, and then you're kind of metagaming and cheating, and you're like, oh, I know I better not use fire damage against this guy because he's immune. But he's he's vulnerable to thunder damage, so I'm going to do that. And the DM's guide, most of it's world building stuff, so it's kind of boring and not useful to you. The only thing you might need it to reference is magic items. If the DM gives you a magic item and you don't remember what it does, look in the DM's guide and it's there. But for the most part, you're looking in here. This is your final set of rules for combat, for your spells, how those all work. If you need to question, you know, maybe you shouldn't, depending on the situation, but if you need to question a call made by your Dungeon Master, this is where you're pulling the questions from, right here, your source material. So, again, not necessary, but I highly, highly recommend. You see these on the side here. This is a personal preference of mine. I did this for 3rd edition on a whim. But I broke it up, races, classes, spells, yada, 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 and it makes it super easy for me if I need to look up a spell that starts with I. Here I am. Imprisonment, Incendiary Cloud, Inflict Wounds. Again, not necessary. If you're using a digital version with PDFs, it probably has bookmarks on the side that does this all for you. But that's kind of where I got the idea. So, Player's Handbook. One of the final things you might look into that, again, is not necessary is if you're playing at a game where the DM has a physical mat, you're not playing Theater of the Mind, you're not playing virtual, he has a mat, a gridded out map where he's going to put enemies down and you're going to be playing as well, you might want a little miniature to represent your character, one that's closer to what your character is. You know, if you're playing a monk, you know, maybe you don't want to use the one that's wielding 2 swords, you'd rather use a guy that looks like a kung fu artist type guy, martial artist guy. Because this is entirely possible, and it's happened because I've been that guy where it's like, okay, you are the Monopoly race car, you are this Parcheesi piece, I think this is a Lego brick, I don't know, you're this guy, and you're this little tiny plastic ninja I got out of a quarter-turn machine at the front of a supermarket. And the enemies are gonna be... I got a handful of change. The enemies will be pennies and dimes or whatever. Or, hey, I just bought this bag of Skittles. How about we make the enemies Skittles, and if you beat them, you get to eat the Skittle. And I've been there, and I've done all of those things. And I've kind of gotten away from there now, where I have invested in minis, which it is an investment. They do kind of, you know, start to add up in price the more you buy. But if you want one to represent yourself, like I played in the Adventure League as a bard, so I didn't have a bard mini, so I went out and bought a little guy with a lute. You can get most minis for around $2 to $5, depending on the intricacy of the miniature, and whether it's made out of resin or made out of metal. Either one is an option. And you can buy them painted and unpainted. If you want to kind of customize it more towards your character, you might want to buy unpainted and paint it yourself. It seems like it's a daunting task, but honestly, I've painted all my minis with just the 50-cent acrylic paint from Joann's, Walmart, whatever, and I think they look fine. Maybe I'll do a review/tutorial on that in the future. But you might want a mini. So, character sheet, blank or filled out, pencil or pencils, some sort of scrap paper, copy of the player's handbook, a set of dice, and possibly a miniature. The only other thing you might want to look into, possibly, are the digital apps. I've looked at a handful of these. Again, there are dice rolling apps that are pretty neat, but one that I find the best... Oh, and I guess, well, at the same point, I don't have any down here with me, I don't think. No. You might have seen the reviews on the channel of the WizKids, or I'm sorry, the Gale Force 9 spellbook cards. and those basically have all of the spells currently, at least for 5th edition anyway, and they're a quick reference to whatever you need to cast. But there's this app called D&D 5e Spellbook Cards, and they basically do the same thing as replicating what the actual physical cards do. So I just opened it up, and let's look at Acid Splash. So you might be able to make this out. There you go. So Acid Splash, cantrip, one action casting time, range 10 feet or 60 feet, whatever it is, but you get the point. It has all that, and you can choose, you know, you can put multiple characters in here. I'm, you know, Yarno the Wizard, and I'm a 3rd level wizard. These are the spells I have access to, and then you basically can hit plus or minus. Again, you can't really see that. There's plus or minus. Yeah, hit plus, and it adds it to your spells, and minus removes it, so then you can just look at, okay, these are my spells, the spells that I know. The only problem with mobile digital apps and things like that, and this is more from a Dungeon Master perspective, and it's annoying because I can tell you I've been there. I'm using this, I had a guy use his laptop to keep track of his character sheet, and, you know, it's very, very easy to just hit back out of your character sheet when it's not your turn, and now you're on Facebook, or you're on Twitter, or what have you. And nothing's more frustrating than when you're trying to build a world and keep everybody engaged, and things are starting to get real, and like, these two guys are talking about the baseball game. This guy's feverishly flipping through a book because he thought he read something and he thought you were wrong, or he's looking up a spell. And, you know, other guy over here is like, oh shit, did you guys see what Joe said on Facebook? Oh, holy crap, there's a video. Hang on, we all gotta watch this. And then everybody gathers around the little phone, and the immersion's gone, and the whole game is derailed. So, just be wary. That's a potential thing that can happen. And as a Dungeon Master, too, there are combat tracking apps and things like that. If you start using those, it's pretty highly likely that when your players are off over here thinking about what they're going to do, and you're waiting, not listening, and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, guys, yeah, just, you know, talk amongst yourselves, and then you're on social media, and that's the end of that. But that, I'd say, is pretty much it as far as you need as a player. Be on the lookout for a Dungeon Master version of this coming soon. I just filmed a review on my phone because I got screen capture software of Dragon Plus. I know that didn't make it into the last D&D Weekly update. The sound's a little shaky because I didn't realize how much it picks up when you just move your hands a little bit. But yeah, I think that's it, guys. One more run through. Character sheet that you can understand, your DM, you can explain to them, blank or filled out. Some sort of erasable writing utensil, preferably a pencil, maybe a big eraser to go with it. Some form of scrap paper, be it notebook, post-its, whatever, just to keep track of things. Not necessary, highly recommended. Copy of the player's handbook. A set of dice that's all your own, that you can then damn or praise as you see fit because they're yours. Miniature, potentially, to represent your character in the game if you're playing with a grid and minis. And, you know, maybe digital apps. The only other thing is, you know, and this is obviously check with your DM, but maybe he wants you to bring snacks, Twizzlers. Maybe you want to bring, oh, the DM loves this beer. Well, maybe I'll buy the 6-pack of that because he gets in a good mood. Maybe I get a magic item. Bribe the DM. No, but obviously it's dependent on the situation. But I have noticed in the course of my playing through games that it kind of becomes things. You'll see things kind of, you know, the longer you play with people, they become kind of staples, like donuts. Store-bought box donuts are like a staple of our D&D games now, and it's just kind of like a thing that we all look forward to. Like, I never go out and buy a box of 12 donuts, but I look forward to it when it's D&D time. So, anyway, guys, did I miss anything? Anything major that you can think of that you need to have, or in your personal experience? This is really great. I love having this in the game with me. Let me know in the comments below. Again, be on the lookout for the Dragon Plus review. Friday, we're going to have the Sword Coast Adventurers What's New as soon as I get done reading it. There's a bunch of other cool stuff. This D&D update's going to have a lot of stuff. There's the Critical Role with Vin Diesel, where they made up the whole new class called the Witch Hunter. Again, it's not D&D was the Coast official, but I like it. It looks good. I'm thinking about maybe playing it. But anyway, guys, hopefully you enjoyed this. You find this useful if you're a new player. And if you have any other questions, just let me know. So, I'm Ted from Nerd Immersion, and happy gaming.